Hi, I'm Zendor, and yes, you have been expecting me.
Namaste and Inla Catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and as always, please like, subscribe, share, make a comment. This is going to be an awesome apocalyptic chat that you'll want to reach out and touch someone with. And I guarantee you, comments and questions will get answered. And also, I would love it if you would visit planetarycitizens.net. There's several free one-click download books that you can get there. Specifically, Planetary Citizens Awakening the Heart of Humanity is one that will just ignite your spirit and soul and give you a whole new outlook and hope for our future. So thanks for that ahead of time, and I'm sure you'll love it. Now, this week's guest is an old friend, acquaintance, Maxwell Gail Jr. That name might be familiar to some of you. He's a wonderful gentleman I first met at a community technology center in San Diego, California. He is an actor, a poet, a writer, an activist. He's been involved with the American Indian movement. He is just a wonderful human being. And we're going to find out more about the depths of his understanding and experience, unlike any conversation you've ever heard with him. So don't go away. This apocalyptic chat is going to be one to remember. I guarantee it. We'll be right back. Max, it's so good to have you here, man. I know I've been after you for years, and the tenaciousness finally worked. Thanks so much for being here.
And now that I talked a bit, and I've kind of caught up, and I'm like for why, sometimes there's somebody you want to call, and every time you go to call them, the phone rings, and you have something
Right.
to deal with. There's a certain element of that, but I'm really delighted just to be sitting across from you, so to speak, and to be sharing thoughts that others we're in a circle with others who have their own hearts and minds and concerns. I'm looking forward
Absolutely.
to it.
Absolutely. Now, historically, we talk about the inner and the outer worlds, and most of us are bereft of talking about the inner ones because of the perception we get from others when we start doing so. A little bit insane, crazy, weird, all those kinds of labels get placed. I spent some time in an institution when I was younger because of it. And yet, it's real. Our experience is real, far more than the belief system. It's the truth that we know. And why would you want to deny that? We need to talk about these things more because it's important. We know today from science and spirituality that the inner world affects the outer world. Matter of fact, some even say it creates the outer world that we experience from that inner place. An old friend of mine, Kai D, calls it the inner truth looking place. Uh,
Hmm.
Now, in that perspective, when did you, and I know you had to because you're a deeply sensitive man. When we first met, that connection was there. And I think that's what's created this longevity that we've had, even though
Hmm.
there only been moments of connection from time to time. When did you begin to experience this? And this interconnection and become aware that there's more to this world than just the physical reality that we experience. What was that like?
Well, I think pretty early on, although I've tuned it out a lot, or just sort of kept it to myself.
Sure. Well, you got
I
busy
mean,
and you were
you
in a
know,
world that probably wasn't too welcome in.
well, I have a twin sister, so I was in the womb with someone else
Ah,
for all the time I was in the womb. That's resonates with me very strongly. My mother had 4 pregnancies, and 3 of them were twins, so she had 5 of us in
wow.
3 years, and all 7 of us in 6 years. So the Gail family was like a deer in the python, going through the school system.
That's
So
amazing.
I I remember very early on, when I was, maybe 3 or so, I had 2 experiences. One was somehow between the head of the bed I was sleeping in and the mattress, there was a space, and I heard something. And when I looked down there, there was a little being, um, and there was a huge space down there. Well, I stuck my hand down there, and something kind of bit my finger or something. I looked down, and I had a conversation with him. I don't remember what was said, but that was, I mean, that
But it
was
was
as
vivid
real as,
enough that you remember it. And
yeah.
that's,
I mean, I was always aware that something had happened that was completely real, but completely other than
oh yeah, how do you deal
the
with something so rare, unique, out of this world of experience,
Mhm.
and then, relate to it somehow? That had to have
Well,
been a
and at
challenge.
a time when it's all still coming in new, so everything
Right.
is full of mystery. And the other thing that happened around the same age was, we were visiting at some people that had a swimming pool at their house. This was before the big, pools became common. It was
Mhm.
basically a kind of a rectangular shaped concrete pit, but I
Right.
was swimming. My mother was playing cards or something with this woman on the deck. I remember coming up, and they say, every time we remember something and all, it's anyway, memory and imagination are anyway. But I do remember having this memory, having this
Sure.
experience of coming up and seeing this blonde. I was a blonde at the time. And this, and then as I'm above the pool, I'm looking over at my mom, who has her back to me. And because it was a silent world, or not like there
Mhm.
was an absence of something, but I vibed her.
Right. Right.
I went,
A little
and she turned
telepathic,
and looked,
just or
and I
telepathy. Hey,
saw her
mom.
jump
Right.
into the water.
Right.
And then the next thing I remember was being on the warm cement and my back being pushed and water coming out of my mouth, and so I had that out of body experience. And those kind of dimensions of going on. When I was in high school, I used to, times when we're all between classes at our lockers, and I would look down the hall to the end where there were lockers at the end, and I would see if I could get certain people to turn around
Ah,
just by concentrating on
yeah,
them,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. It's kind of
and
fun,
very
isn't it?
often someone would turn around like, what, so
Sure.
so
Well, and
so
we're
I
all
guess I
able
was
to do
aware of
that,
those
I
things.
believe.
Huh?
I say
But
we're all able to do that. We
hmm
just don't, we're not aware of that. You walk into a room and you look at somebody and all of a sudden they turn and look at you.
hmm yeah,
That's energy.
yeah. So um so when you ask when did I first become aware, it's more like later, when I started remembering, or tuning in to
Right.
others who were sharing these experiences, and from various perspectives, from kind of reductive science, and what might be an explanation of consciousness arising out of the
Sure.
atoms
Sure.
in our brain, to the other way of going at it, which,
Now, did you ever find anything that was corroboratory in books or other people or, movies or things like that in your high school and early um, post-teen years?
not so much in high school and college, because I found myself looking for it in a much more the kind of materialistic way, whether trying to come to some understanding of, God and religion and all
Hmm.
of that, which was took the form. I grew up in a small community, had a Catholic church and a Protestant church. It was officially an Episcopalian church, but all the Protestants went there until I got into my last couple of years of high school. We built a big new church to accommodate our big congregation.
Hmm.
And then they built a subdivision I was an island. My community was an island. And that brought in a number of people. So the Presbyterians, there were enough to peel off and start a Presbyterian church, and the Lutherans, and so now it became like, how do we get people in seats to pay the mortgage on our big new church, and
Right.
all of those dynamics going on. And then I connected with my girlfriend senior year, and all was from a Catholic family, and so I had a period where I became very much drawn to Catholicism. Time came my freshman year at college where neither one had anything useful to say to me about civil rights or Vietnam
Right.
or girls, for that matter, that was,
Sure.
helpful. So I kind of departed on into, I was more of a science geek than into literature or something in high school. I was on a program. I went 3 years to this small college, Williams College in Massachusetts. You'd go 3 years there and 2 years to MIT, and you'd get a BA and a BS.
Hmm.
But after a summer working in research with the Ford Motor Company, and my experience with the guys who had 800s on their math boards compared to my little measly 710, it was like
Right. Right.
I and I arced over into economics, and I used to joke that I ended up getting a BS degree by getting a BA in economics. Uh, and I was on that kind of route, and then I got into some head years into Carl Jung, and looking to come to some understandings. I found
Sure. Carl Jung,
the
Aldous
thing,
Huxley, Baba Ramdas was,
yeah,
uh,
all these things that were available. Eventually I moved out to California in 1969. The human potential movement was happening. In a weird job
Werner
I had for a
Erhard,
while.
Est,
Pardon me?
Werner Erhard.
Werner. Yeah, well, I mean, that was kind of a whole other thing. I didn't. I found myself, kind of apart from that, watching it all, and at the same
Hmm.
time, I mean, I knew many people who went to Est. There was
Right.
a time where I'd share some of my rhymes, and people say, "Oh, you must have done what is the spin-off of Est? What was it called?"
Landmark.
Landmark.
Yeah.
Oh, you must have done Landmark. I say, no, no, I didn't. I knew people who had. I'd been invited to a couple of graduations, which they used to recruit.
That happened to
So
me
I was
too. I
familiar
didn't
with
see
it.
the sense in Landmark because I was already beyond where they were trying to take
Yeah,
people.
yeah. I'd say, no, I never did that. Oh, you have to. I say, well, if you think I already have, then why do I have to?
Right.
But I feel like these are, universal things in life.
Yeah.
Some people get them with a whole vernacular that's really much more around. They've only worked in a gas station or something. You know what I mean? It's like
Sure.
the vernacular is not so important as even the concepts or the pattern, as you distinguish with in conciliant and coherence.
Right.
A term my late friend John Trudell used to use a lot in his Native American thinker and poet. So I've just lost track of the question that got me on that ramp. So I think it's time for me to take a breath and let you let you come.
Oh, you're so gracious. Uh, so yeah, we were going down the road of what it was like after your high school years and you're going into college and looking at the life and how you were navigating with this awareness that you had. Now, so you went to California, you got involved in the human potential movement, which was huge.
Well, I
And
was influenced by it being around,
yeah,
and and
well,
you know,
those people, right, um, were generally more, not necessarily educated, more aware than others and self-aware and being able to talk about those kinds of
mhm,
things and
mhm.
the internal development that's necessary in order to rise above the trials and tribulations of life, if you will. Now, once you began your journey in California, what got you interested? I know you wrote a bunch of songs, you were playing in bands and did a bunch of recordings, and then got involved in an opportunity to become an actor. How were you led into that? Because I have a feeling that was a deeply connected experience as well.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't really. I had a period where I tried to write some songs. I mean, I
Hmm.
hadn't recorded anything or any of that. It was more like it was a way I could make some money. To the writing was more like trying to be more like Tom Lear, or it was. So the acting happened. Excuse me. I had read two books. I taught for 2 years right out of college
Hmm.
in a private school that didn't care that I had no teaching education. I went to an Eastern college and I played sports. And in this private school, they needed an eighth grade boys teacher, and that's what most of the dads that were sending their kids to this school wanted for their sons, to
Hmm.
be go to an Eastern college and play sports. So,
Right.
but it did get me sort of trying to read up on ancient history at a time when the Leakeys in the Olduvai Gorge in Africa, were pushing
Right.
back the time of our ancestors millions of years, and
Right.
so that was all pretty interesting. And then, but after 2 years, I ended up going out to University of Michigan and getting an MBA because the teaching was interesting, but the whole experience of this private school in Grosse Pointe. Anyway, so
I know that. I
so
taught high school for 6 or 7 years and variety of things, special ed, regular ed, private schools, charter schools, and
uh
even a
uh
residential treatment center.
interesting.
It was.
Interesting. Well, it's a wonderful kind of interactive place to be, but the institution of education and stuff has its own
Sure.
kind of gelatin sort
Guardrails.
of, and yeah. So, but anyway, I headed out to California. I had reconnected with a eighth grade girlfriend who had moved away and out there. So, and there was a lot of kind of interest in what was happening. When I got there, I sort of felt like the flower was wilting by the time I got there
Mm,
in later 1969. A lot of people had moved away up into the hills of Oregon or whatever, and
mhm.
but so I was there. I was playing piano bar at the Hyatt House down near the airport from 5 to 9. I took the law boards. I thought, well, I can go to school, and there was a stage play of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and that was one of the books I'd read along with Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee that
Mm.
had kind of an impact on me, So and it had opened up, and they got a good review from the local columnist. So suddenly they had a run on their hands, and they happened to put an ad in the paper for understudies, and I happened to see it, and it was a rainy day. I didn't want to go down to rugby practice. I was playing with the San Francisco Rugby Club.
Right.
Anyway, they offered me the understudy part of the chief, and before I could ever go down, even to learn where I needed to be standing at certain points and stuff, the guy who was playing the part had a artistic differences fight with one of the other actors. the guy playing the chief was very much into the method. He was
Right.
really crying, you know. He would,
Right. Right.
but because I saw a couple of performances, you know, there was so much snot coming out of his nose, you couldn't understand what he was saying. There was
Ah,
another actor who was totally technical. He never cried, but he did, you know,
right. Right.
he would break your heart every night playing another character in the play, you know, a guy who was having trouble dealing with his own sexuality and all. So he gave, and after the curtain call, the big weightlifting chief gave this guy a forearm shiver, you know, and the rest of the cast said, okay, that's enough. And they called me and said, be at the theater at 6 o'clock. And I was just getting replaced in my job at the Hyatt House by a guy from the Marina down in LA, you know, who had
Okay.
Renaissance shirts and sat on a stool and played guitar and was tan and, you know, uh, uh, um, so suddenly I was playing the chief in this stage play of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Rather
And I ended up
synchronistic, right?
doing it for 2 years. Yeah, it was it opened me up to the mask off part of acting. I was
Mm.
aware of the mask on. My mother had been an actress. My twin sister and brother were, you know, it wasn't like it was some
Wasn't
strange.
totally foreign to you.
No, no,
No.
it was just, and I ended up getting a couple of small movie parts. And my first line was in a one line in Dirty Harry, you know. And I decided to follow it out. And I did. I went down to LA. I got involved with the Actors Studio. I went and did the play in New York for a time, and worked with the Actors Studio there a bit, and mostly just observed. I was a little too shy
Mm.
to really get up and work, and and uh, uh, and I went back and I started running long distances on the beach, and I started processing a lot of my own spiritual, you know, life, whatever creative growth
Right.
in rhymes. It wasn't just this is what I want to say to my mom at Christmas or something. It was just
Sure.
what was
Well,
unfolding
alone on
for
the
me.
beach, what else are you going to do when you're running? You're and as thoughtful as you are, the
Yeah.
experiences you've had, this would be kind of a natural evolutionary
Well,
process.
there's a rhythm to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh, that's what the acting was about. And then I did start to get more, better responses on my auditions. One of them, which was for Barney Miller.
Mm.
And I got offered the pilot, and I thought, okay, I'll do the pilot. And that'll give me enough money to go up to Big Sur, where I knew of a place that I could rent the kind of the basement room that looked underneath the main deck out down through the oaks to the ocean.
Ah,
And in
that's a
this
beautiful area too.
oh yeah, it's incredible. It had a futon and an upright piano in there. So that was, you know, but the show got picked up. Um, and I did the first half season, and I had a good time, and I was kind of learning. I was by far the most inexperienced person in the cast, but
Certainly didn't look
you
like
know,
it.
I had a feeling for it. Well, you know, it evolved, and I kept doing it. And after a year and a half or so, I was still interested in where the music was going to the songs, and I made a connection through a friend with Buffy St. Marie.
Hmm.
Was a Native American artist at the time. There's a
Right.
lot of stuff that's come up about Buffy's background, and it's all a more nuanced situation. And I won't try to go into that right now. But Buffy certainly has always walked the talk and all, you know. But
She has.
anyway, through
She has.
Buffy, I met these guys that I'd been seeing in Time magazine and on the news. When I was in San Francisco, there was an occupation of Alcatraz. When I
Hmm.
was in New York, the occupation at Wounded Knee, and I connected with that, including a singer songwriter named Floyd Westerman. A lot of people would know Floyd through Dances with Wolves
Yeah.
and The Doors, and you know he ended up having an acting career, but he's a
I've
wonderful.
got a clip with him where he's talking about what we're going to give to our children that I used as a PSA in the TV show I did back in the 90s.
Yes, that I was talking to you about earlier, about where you did these wonderful interviews with the people doing the runs, bringing
Hmm.
the runs together from different parts of the hemisphere, and you closed it with a clip of Floyd,
It,
and
that's the one.
that connected me. through that, I found my way into the sweat lodge and the Sundance. And so I found on the economic,
Did you ever do the dance?
I
Or did you?
no, I didn't never Sundanced. I didn't feel that was an appropriate thing to do. I felt at the time maybe physically I
Yeah,
could have because I was in
piercings
quite
are
a
a
good shape.
little tough to take.
Yeah, but I just didn't feel like that was something, it's like often, it's like I never followed up on the notion of being adopted into a tribe or something. I
Right.
think that uh, uh, that that they talk about the wannabe tribe, you
Sure,
know.
sure.
Uh,
I got
but
hoodwinked into my daughter came to live with me after my divorce for a little bit. She met a Hopi girl at the same high school that they were going to, and the
uh-huh,
two of them conspired, and pretty soon her mother and I were dating. And I
uh-huh,
didn't realize it at the time. Her father was a past president of the tribe. And
uh-huh,
so I don't know if I got adopted, but I was invited to some dances. Uh,
uh-huh,
and then got yanked out into one of them into the plaza during
uh-huh.
break where the clowns split up and went to war with
Yes.
each other with all these non-Indians that they pulled out that were in the
Uh-huh,
center of the plaza. And they were
uh-huh.
just kind of teaching us what it was like to be or to go through the process that they did. And
Mm-hmm.
wow, what a phenomenal education and the ways and even the reason I was at uh, the 500-year run.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to get that, wow. And Jean Chaudhuri, who was a Muskogee Creek, she had
Mm-hmm.
married Joy Chowdhury, who was the head of East Asian Studies at ASU at the time. And she had invited me to her home for a meeting after I'd interviewed her on my show. And I'm like, okay, cool. I have no idea what it's about. Well, I show up. I'm one of three white guys and about 40 natives, Indians,
Mm-hmm.
and they are gathering. There's 18 to 21 tribes gathered to present to the city what they wanted to see in the redevelopment of the Indian school property, which had been an internment camp. It was built in 1890, had been an
Uh-huh.
early internment camp, turned into an Indian high school, and then in 1990 it closed because they couldn't afford to do the asbestos abatement.
Uh-huh.
And so
Interesting.
a corporation out of Florida swapped 100,000 acres with through the Bureau of Interior and ended up
Uh-huh.
with this property and then traded 70 or 120 acres of the property with the city of Phoenix in order to get 2 blocks of downtown. And so now the city had this property and they were going to develop a park. And so the tribes wanted to, or the nations wanted to present what they wanted to see in the Native American heritage that the city said was saying that they wanted to build the park in. And
Yeah.
so I ended up being the token white boy that was taking all the notes and ended up presenting to the mayor and the city council and the public
Uh-huh.
subcommittee. And wow, what an experience of just being enmeshed in that. And well, you know what it's like. There's no words for that. You just have this experience that is more connected in your as you learn their philosophy and history and ways and traditions, and it's far more connected than anything that we're experiencing today. Although there's a lot of that understanding and wisdom that's popping up in leadership circles now.
Yeah. And I mean, it really is all about relationship, I guess, to
Yeah,
reduce it to a word,
absolutely. Yeah.
and so that is something just like we were talking earlier, some things are just about the vibration
Well, that's what
that's
coherence is. It's
happening.
about
You can have a
relationship.
concept about it or something, but
Right.
those can get in the way. So,
Oftentimes
yeah,
do, right? Those
yeah.
belief systems, cognitive bias and things like that that don't allow us to just be still and have that experience, right? That open-hearted, open-minded reunion, if you will, the memory of
Hmm.
the opening that I use in La Catch, that's a Mayan phrase for I am another you.
Hmm.
We don't see that. What do you, as you grew into your roles and the acting, um, did that and your involvement with American Indian movement and those kinds of concepts, did that have an effect on the roles that you were offered and the people that, um, because everything's connected, right? What did you do
Yeah.
in that process?
Well, I think in many ways, for me, the because once you're in those days when there were like three network stations in
Right,
PBS, if
right,
you were in a primetime show, you were you were a part of something, that people got for free in their living rooms, and most households still only had one TV, or maybe two, but it wasn't anything like we've all got our own, we can watch our own shows, and
right, right.
so I think that and plus my own journey that took me, I think that played more of a role. As I can look back on it and say, well, if I continued to work with the Actors Studio or explore, I didn't have a TV in those days, but when I see cuts now, I see it was such wonderful writing, and we evolved a kind of a collaborative, thing that we had
Mhm.
going on. But I sometimes, I see in the work that there could have been, deeper work or whatever. I ended up, once you're in a TV show, you do get offered roles, the
Sure.
network, especially your network,
Right. Yeah, it kind of
well,
cascades,
like
doesn't it?
you got the in for the first offers of guest parts on other TV
Right.
shows and stuff. So often it was like, oh, well, if I do this movie of the week, then I can give that money to this effort that's going on or something.
Sure.
That was my life
Absolutely.
was more about that, and became toward the end, as portable video was just showing up as a technology, a way to try to share my experiences. Because often, if I just tried to use the sort of platform I had being in a TV show, the
Hmm.
story would be about the wonderful actor helping the poor downtrodden Indians, and if
Right.
anything, it was a flow the other way, as I'm sure you understand.
Sure.
That.
Well, and during that time too, I showed you this earlier, but this pin that
Yeah,
I've had for 25 years, you gave to me in San
yeah,
Diego, and I've had that ever since. And
yeah,
it's the four directions, but it's in a yin yang kind of the spin, right?
yeah,
We're
yeah, with the
all,
other colors of the rainbow on the outer
yeah.
layer. So that was when I had the show had ended. I had gotten married. I had all this videotape from stuff that we shot, but it was way too radical for the networks. And once we decided we didn't want to do the show anymore, the networks were not at all. It was,
Right.
and so and I'd gotten married, and when our daughter was 8 months old, and I recorded a bunch of songs
Hmm.
because my wife had a great relationship with my best man Merle Saunders, who was a wonderful San Francisco musician. I mean, Merle played for everybody from Miles to Jerry Garcia at the end. It was
Wow.
and so she said, let's get Max in the studio and record some of his songs. So we did that. Did a one man play on Babe Ruth on Broadway, just to see could I hold the center of a
Yeah.
evening
Could you
of
hold your
stuff,
own? Right.
and then, but it was in doing that we discovered that my wife had colon cancer.
Mm.
And so the next 2 years were kind of first we're going to beat it and so on and so forth, but in the end we didn't, and all of that got just put on a back burner. And I had a few years of being like a single mom, I always said, because I was ready to be a dad. I'd reached 40,
Hmm.
but I was, still in the beginning of understanding what it is that moms come up with.
Right.
And I was certainly a single mom who had resources. I didn't have to go to, anyway, all of that being said, after a few years, I did reconnect with someone, and and got married and had another child and all. And I did a show with Frank Zappa's two oldest kids, Moon and Dweezil, kind of inspired by their family and stuff. But what I learned was TV had changed and I had changed, and it wasn't a fit. And I was as much of a problem as the new, there was no Danny Arnold, that incredible creative writer talent and
Right.
commitment to making a great show. There was just an idea, I kind of pinged out of that around the time I did do a show called Whiz Kids that was about a bunch of kids and computers and stuff. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I saw what was happening with computers coming, and there wasn't the World Wide Web existed, but the browser hadn't been created yet. But I saw that there was this great hopefulness that we
Right.
would have this great conversation as a species once people got connected, and it was just about, a lot of people didn't have this disposable income to buy a new Mac,
Right.
and I got very involved in the idea that there could be a show that was like a TV show, like Walt Disney turned on land and on air together,
Mhm.
Disneyland, and we could do on air, on land, online, and on the level, I like to say, these
Mhm.
laps, these local access places that were how I connected with the Community Technology Center network where we met, because there were people creating centers that people could come in and get
Sure.
access to a computer
Sure.
and how to use it. And I poured myself into that for a number of years. I think I did a lot of good bringing people together and stuff. I couldn't
Oh,
figure out a way
absolutely.
to make a
Absolutely.
living.
You were, and we met at a community technology center
Yes.
event, and I was called to LA to help Jimmy McNichol. And you're familiar with Christie's brother.
Yes.
And yeah, so he was putting together something called Pop Read at the time,
Uh-huh.
which was um, dismantling kids' cartoons and putting questions and about science and math and history and English and all those kinds and embed them in the cartoons and the shows themselves,
Oh,
which
interesting.
the kids are already watching TV, so why not use it as an education
Yes.
piece
Yeah,
instead of a
absolutely.
babysitter?
Uh-huh.
Um, so that was kind of cool. Now, what I wanted to ask you too, I noticed that um, years back you had some appearances on Hawaii 5-0.
Yes.
Um, dear friend Kai D played
Uh-huh.
Wofat. Did you
Uh-huh.
have an opportunity to sit and speak with him? As he played this villain, and yet he had a doctorate in theology.
Yeah. No, I've been interested in him, but no, I never did
Oh,
meet him.
wonderful
Yeah.
man. He was
Yeah.
one of the first guests on my show here in 1990. One of
Uh-huh.
the things he passed the I think I interviewed him in 91. He passed in 92. And then here's some weird stuff that um, just a few weeks after he'd passed, I was at my desk, didn't have a computer yet. I was doing some work, and then I stopped and paused and just put my chin on my hands and started meditating. And all of a sudden, I'm in a conversation with him out of the blue, right? Have
Uh-huh.
no idea how it happened.
Uh-huh.
And I'm about 20 seconds into the conversation, and I'm like, well, Kai, am I interrupting you? I know you got to be busy over there doing stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
And and then this big booming voice responded by, "There are many worlds." And on the Z, I'm living in a block um, guest house, cement slab,
Uh-huh.
right? Nothing to vibrate, and the whole thing shook just for
Uh-huh.
a moment. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
what's going on, right? Just like 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. And so
Uh-huh.
I go ask the people in the front house, hey, did you fall over? Did you knock some furniture over? What? He said, no, no. And the gal happened to be a spiritualist, and she asked me what happened, and I told her, and she
Uh-huh.
said, well, when the masters want to move, they'll move. And I was still lost. Like,
Uh-huh.
what was that? Well, a couple days later, I'm in Scottsdale at my girlfriend's house, and the Scottsdale Progress is on their kitchen table. I never read the paper, but I'm prompted to open it up. Inside cover, there's a headline that says FAA announces sonic boom. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
interesting. So I start reading the article. Tuesday morning around 10 a.m., the FAA office gets flooded with calls and they finally announce it's a sonic boom. Well,
Uh-huh.
then the second paragraph starts out with, however, Luke Air Force Base, Sky Harbor, and Williams Air Force Base could not identify its source. So that kind of left me with a, huh, right? How do you explain that? And it just, as you were talking earlier, there are so many different dimensions. You had the out of body experience, but you probably drowned in the pool
Mhm.
or in the process of it. And you got out of body and you
Mhm.
said, "Hey, mom, right? I need your help." Those kinds of things. What do you feel that how, especially after COVID now, where people are starting to ask questions, they're getting curious, they're diving deeper into who they are and what they're here for, what the world's all about, and they're really putting the belief systems to the test. How do you see that in your own life and reflecting on that and where it might be going, do you think?
Well, wow, these are all good questions, but I mean,
Well, you're a
belief
good guy to
systems,
question them, right?
just belief itself is, the whole notion of what is belief and what is faith and what is, Carl Jung was asked toward the end of his life, do you still believe? He says, well, no, believe. He says, no, now I know.
Right.
So
Because the experience.
yeah, and you talk about since COVID. I mean, there are a lot of people that are what their reaction to COVID is. They're either believing in Fauci and the value, or that the whole thing was a scam. So
Right.
they're operating, which to me is on a certain level of not understanding a whole lot of things just in the kind of materialistic science realm of
Absolutely.
what
Yeah,
are
material and the
vaccines and all of that.
reductionist, that kind of
And
stuff.
then on the largest, like what was his name? The French playwright Antonin Artaud, who developed a form of theater around the same time as the theater of absurdity. He called it the theater of
Hmm.
cruelty, but he had a statement. He said if the germ was anything, this was in a time that germs were still a radical idea,
Right.
if it is anything more than a mere verbal contrivance, it's still a manifestation of something that's essentially psychic,
Hmm.
so now that getting, does matter create consciousness? Does consciousness create matter? There are wonderful conversations about this going on. There's a article I read recently, the narratives, the grammar changes in different epochs. Pre-modern, the
Right.
grammar allowed for an enchanted world. We were a part of everything, and you know, then into the modernity, it became no, it's all just stuff. It's all
Right.
just, and uh,
And
and
now
now,
quantum science is bringing up not just alignment and coherence, but that's filtering through into leadership circles and management
yes,
and
yes,
all
and
this
you
kind of
you
thing. It's
you
a
mentioned
totally new
earlier,
language.
there are lots of people from different political sides looking to go. Can we get, there's this notion of dialogue, a conversation with a center instead of sides. There are people
Right.
that are seeing there's some larger game than this zero sum game of politics.
Hmm.
Life is a life is an open game. So
Truly.
you can have win win and you can have lose lose. Where in a zero sum game, which politics, once somebody loses the election, somebody wins it.
Right.
Maybe they cheated, maybe that, but in the terms of how the results are done, it's a win lose. You play a win lose game like it's
Like
you
there's no
know
tomorrow.
well, if
You were,
you end up biasing the whole system toward lose lose,
yes.
because you're thinking
Yeah.
if they're losing, I must be winning. If I'm winning, they must be losing. So
Well, yeah, and there's still
uh,
all these borders and you know, uh, challenge for command and control for resources and all of those kinds of things. Now, do you remember back in the 70s about the time that you were going through these things too? Donald Keyes, does that name ring a bell? And Planetary Citizens back then?
Yes, it's a kind of tingle off in the distance,
Okay, okay. Well,
and
yeah,
especially when you plan a
he
planetary
was
system.
Youthont at the time was the Secretary General of the UN. And so
Uh-huh.
Donald had this notion of a borderless world.
Uh-huh.
And Youthont was one of the original members, Norman Cousins, Edgar
Mm-hmm.
Mitchell, Barbara Marx Hubbard, all
Mm-hmm.
of those kinds of people were associated with it at that time. But as you know, in the 70s, borderless world, you don't want to talk about that, right?
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
didn't fly.
Yeah.
Now,
Woo woo.
today, it does. We're interconnected. I actually got tapped on the shoulder to get Planetary Citizens and restore it as a nonprofit. So we've been working on presenting this notion of a borderless world, the
Mm-hmm.
coherence, the holistic system that Barbara's co-creation wheel
Mm-hmm.
gives indication towards. And then there's the spiral dynamics model that shows the level of planetary coherence, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
in the behaviors and how we can tell where the civilization is based on the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, in this time, there seems to be at least the notion, especially after COVID, where people who went beyond taking sides and said, okay, now let's look at this from a place of one. How do
Mm-hmm.
we learn how to get along and work together to co-create the kind of world we know is possible? Because we've got the
Mm-hmm.
skill sets, we've got the talents, we've got the philosophy. Now, how do we connect the dots with each other, get rid of all the silos, and
Mm-hmm.
begin to show what's possible? Now,
Yeah.
do you see those kinds of things coming through your circles and or at least talk about them, possibly even, folks that are doing some things toward that?
Well, I see certainly that connection that amongst our species, that we are all one species,
Hmm.
and the larger sense that we are, but small part of all of life, which I think is where, when you are around that understanding, that feeling, that relationship that you were talking about earlier
Right.
around Native people, that there is that um, connection, not so much focused on human beings and all that idea that still is tied into how different we are from all the rest of life, and the
Hmm.
earth is ours to dominate, and all of those things. Um,
No, we're
but at the same
stewards.
time,
That's what we're supposed to be, right? Well,
at the
the thing
same
that,
time, oh,
not to interrupt you, but
yeah.
there's an important piece here that in the book that most Americans swear by, um, we were given dominance, right? Or misunderstood that we were given dominance over the earth, right?
Yes.
Well, we misunderstood that. It's not dominance. That's how we've taken it, and that's what we've done. But
Hmm.
what was really intended was that we're stewards of the
Yeah. Yeah. That word domain, we have a lot in our language that are we're sort of locked into, colonization is
right.
colon, the digestive, there are a lot of things within the language, um, the sort of noun focused
It's
of
all a bunch
European
of crap,
languages,
right?
well, it's just, it is, we're sort of this, this paper I read the other day talked about somebody, using the metaphor, so sort of little cartoon thing of the two fish swimming along, and an elder fish comes swimming between them, and he says, "How's the water?" And then the two fish continue on a little bit, and then one of them says, "What is water?"
Right.
So the fish don't know that it's water because they're in the water all the time.
Sure.
So, and then he used that to, these are the grammars that he was using, the metaphor of a grammar of our times. I started to refer to this a little earlier,
You
so
did.
we are whatever language we're using. There certainly is a move toward a nationalism, a sense that the sort of free trade and openness and just dispersing the boundaries, let's say, led to now all of a sudden, well, all of our chips come from Taiwan, and Taiwan is sort of free for now, but China's sort of just there. Where are we going? I read yesterday about a split within the Democratic Party. Are we going back to the old ways of that, or and of course the Republican in the sense of America first. So I
Right.
see those dynamics going on as well.
I don't know, you don't know this, but I'm on the board of directors for the Arizona Independent Party.
Uh-huh.
Paul Johnson, who happened to be mayor at the time when I was working with the Phoenix Indian School project,
Mm-hmm.
he called me up. I had the LLCs for the Arizona Independent Party and the Independent Party of Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
He had gotten the No Labels Party on the Arizona ballot, which was a lot of
Uh-huh.
work and a lot of money to do.
Uh-huh.
So they wanted to change their name to the Arizona Independent Party. Hence, the
Uh-huh.
phone call to me is like, hey, can we use this? And that got me the
Uh-huh.
board seat. Well, what was interesting is that we put the name change into the Secretary of State. It was
Uh-huh.
approved.
Uh-huh.
Then the Clean Elections Committee says, oh, wait a minute, we're going to sue the state because that shouldn't happen. And their argument was, you're going to confuse voters because now you're an independent party and everybody thinks if they're signed the voter registration as a non-affiliated party,
Uh-huh.
that they're automatically independent.
Uh-huh.
You're talking
Okay.
about the grammar, right? So
Yeah.
here's
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
confusion.
Languaging.
They're
Yeah.
saying, so they're using that
Uh-huh.
to thwart the efforts. And, our slogan is party above or country above politics,
Uh-huh.
right? That we're here to make sense common so that we can work together to solve our collective challenges.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And they're still in this two-party, dominance
Languaging.
control.
Yeah.
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 And so,
Yeah.
but
And no
there's,
labels is a label.
yeah, exactly.
It's kind of
Exactly.
like
It's a national party,
non-duality,
right?
how do you, what is non-duality? You kind of like, well, there's a duality right there in the phrase,
Exactly. Yeah.
duality and non,
And yet,
it's
we hear all
tricky.
of these comments about, well, it's a state of oneness, right? There's one
Yeah.
universe, there's one consciousness that we're all
Yeah.
connected to. We talked earlier about being cosmic
Uh-huh.
consciousness condensed into form. Well, that's
Uh-huh.
connected to that unity consciousness that we're all
Uh-huh.
connected to. Even the Vedas
Uh-huh.
say that we're all divine threads condensed into
Yeah.
form,
Yeah.
connected to source, capable
Uh-huh.
of God consciousness. Well, what's that?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Maybe living in harmony?
Uh-huh.
That's a first step.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how do you see that evolving? Because this term of oneness, we talk about it, but we can't see from that place of one yet.
Uh-huh. Well, for me, I find my way with sort of where I am or whatever, or what I have to say or what, in my rhymes, I could answer that sharing one or two of those, but
And you do,
so
but you have that awareness, that understanding, and have had for quite some time. What do you feel is important that in knowing that your experience, the truth, like Carl Jung, the knowing, right? How do you express that knowing today so that it can be received by the listeners that are starting to become aware and curious?
well, like that, he said, I've had that understanding. There, even that is kind of like a framing of, I understand it, like I got the concept,
Yeah, it's
whereas you
still,
say it's a pattern,
intellectual, and it's just
and
the experience is a,
Jung, the last book of all the stuff that I read and worked on, the last of his book, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, and he talked about his experiences in Africa and with some Native Americans out in the Southwest, and
right.
so he was still opening up. I if I could share at least one of my rhymes with you, that
Oh,
would,
I love
because
it.
it gets me there.
Absolutely.
So I, I, it goes bigger, bigger than you. And by that, there's the capital U that people get hung up, and who's the you you're praying to, and then there's the you, the general you
Yeah, the
that we can
personal,
use,
general,
including ourselves. You
inclusive.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? Are you
Yeah, yeah,
one?
yeah.
Bigger than you, the whole notion of you, bigger than me, bigger than all our hearts and minds can see, bigger than all we believe there to be, bigger than bondage, bigger than free, bigger than love, bigger than hate, bigger than destiny, bigger than fate, bigger than humble, bigger than great, bigger than race or religion or state, bigger than teacher or guru or sage, bigger than sex or youth or age, bigger than anger, resentment, or rage, bigger than anything said on a page or a stage, bigger than action, whatever we try, bigger than all we accept or deny, bigger than any one, what, who, or why, bigger than bigger and bigger than I.
Wow. That it's so the articulation, the sense, the understanding, the presence that brings just in listening to the words and being with them.
Yeah, me too. It gets me there too,
Yeah,
especially to share it with
yeah.
someone like you, who I know is like, so it's,
That's that's an element of soul talk, right? Now, with that, in this understanding of the spirit to spirit, soul to soul connection that we have, the energy beings that we are, that I was talking to Irvin Laszlo, may he rest in peace. Um, it's been several years ago. He just turned 90 at the time.
uh,
And I thought I was going to be a smart ass, right? And ask him a bunch of questions about, okay, well, we got 9 planes of consciousness. We got 9 dimensions according to Nepean Close. And Swigard has 9 planes that we have bodies on. There's solfeggio tones. There's the number 9 of completion. What are all these patterns about? Is this part of that condensation into form from the higher self to the physical body? And
uh,
then, quantum science has proven that it's 99% space and 1% material.
uh,
He had this really astute, quick breath, and he says, I would say it's 100% energy.
uh,
So there's no differentiation. How can you argue with that? Right.
yeah.
And so it was so wonderful for me to be put in my place with what I thought was current information. And yet it took me to a whole new level when I heard that. It just resonated like your poem, right? Where you just know the truth of it. Now, how we all have these senses, right? And as you know, in the indigenous ways, they have the 3 brains, the gut, the heart, the head. The gut's first brain.
Hmm.
So how do we use our first brain better when we encounter situations or other people? And is that something that you see others or you experience yourself that you do more now than you did earlier in your life?
Well, I hope so.
Honest answer. Right.
I'd like to think so, but
Well, you mentioned several times, you go with your gut feeling, your intuition,
yeah,
that
yeah.
sense.
And there's
That's
all kinds
what
of,
it is.
the stuff that's in the brain is in the heart, is in the gut,
Yeah.
So, and these are old healing and understanding traditions of being, and that have that got lost in a way as certain kinds of Western medicine that found it can do wonderful things,
It can.
but also can
It
be,
can mess things up even more.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and we're supposedly able to heal ourselves. We just haven't learned how yet because it's all because of our stinking thinking that causes all the disturbance in our bodies. We don't pay attention to
Hmm.
our bodies. We live from the head up or from the shoulders up, most of us.
Hmm.
Now, in the work, uh, I'm saying work, you're semi-retired. Um, what are you doing today to forward this consciousness to others?
Well, a lot, at least the way I've been thinking of it is I do have these sort of back burner things, as I said, in
Hmm.
1980, I started as portable video was showing up. So all the people who'd been doing documentaries where they had a budget, they could afford a certain amount of 16 millimeter film and to get that developed. So their interviews, everything they did, they had to think about. All of a sudden you got videotape. It's cheap. We can shoot everything and stuff, but
Right.
also we can. So the things that I was experiencing, I felt there was a way to share with other people who are looking to tell those stories. I had this notion of a docu-musical. I had a show notion that, as I was saying earlier, the network was interested in until we weren't doing the show anymore. It was kind of like Charles Kuralt on against the opposite Johnny Carson slot, which they hadn't
Right.
been able to find it. But also during that time was the hostage crisis in Iran, and Nightline was born. So all of a sudden that spot was gone. But I just was looking for some kind of way. So, but those are still there, and a lot of the people who are part of what's going on in Indian country today, and a part of the conversation around the environment and all that's
Hmm.
so polarized right now. So I'm looking to get those made available, at least out in Indian country.
Sure.
I've got them on a like a
Well, you
website
mentioned
now.
you've got some stuff on Spotify and um,
Well, then I have music. I have the recording that I did that got put on the back burner. So
mhm,
I have that up there now, mainly so I can listen to it. But I like the songs. I think have a value. I'm trying to figure out how to mix them, not open too big a can of worms. I just when I got them digitized, I just said put everybody that's playing on it. I know
yeah,
it's too many people and all of that, but
sure.
a lot of them aren't here anymore. And so I have those two kind of overlapping projects, and figuring out a way that I do love playing music and playing with people, and I'm trying to figure out a way to do to put it into a kind of a theatrical a story of my own growth where the songs were. So those are the
Sure.
sort of three things I'm working on and looking for how they interact as I hit. I'm 83, so I don't want to stay up late. I don't want to
Well,
be
in
on the
today's
road a
terms,
whole
you're
lot.
still young, right?
I have a number of friends. Hal Linden is 94. My friend David Amram is 94. Orrin Lyons, the title is Faith Keeper of the Onondaga Nation. Orrin was an All-American lacrosse player with Jim Brown, but his
Hmm.
role in the Indian world is, there's such respect for him, and he's a wonderful artist. And, and who was it? Somebody else that is in their 90s that I know. So, I know what's the old joke? Gee, Doc, if I'd known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. So but at the same time, we don't know for sure, any of us really,
Right.
what's right around the bend, but you got a pretty good idea, even though
Well,
there are many people.
you live, what I hear you saying is that you're living in the present and doing what's in front of you to do that still has passion and purpose with it.
Yeah, yeah, at the same time, I'm totally drawn into the kind of scrolling of. There's so many things. I used to always have a few newspapers and a few books I was carrying around, so I've always been like that. Well, right now
Right.
you can watch Messi score a goal, and then you can have somebody talk about emergence, and I mean,
Sure.
there's so many things, and how they connect. There's a wonderful group in Pari, Italy, that you might be interested or even know about. The Pari Center is where they I first caught it a couple of years ago. They did a series of discussions, offers called Beyond Boehm. So it was around David
Mm.
Boehm, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yep.
It's a
Yep. Physicist.
kind of quantum physicist,
Yep.
a protege of Einstein's, wrote like the book on the Copenhagen dogma, and then he
Mhm.
kind of departed from that, got off into with Krishnamurti and into talking about deeper things that the world of physics said, oh, that's a no, that's you're getting off into philosophy and
Yeah.
stuff.
And now they're coming
But
back
now it's
around
coming.
where
Yes,
spirituality and science
yes,
are going, hey, we've been saying the same thing using different language. Isn't it
yeah,
time we learned how to dance better?
yeah. So this is a gathering. They have another of their kind of 3 weekend sessions going on of Sunday and Monday, Saturday and Sunday mornings, 2 hours in California. Anyway, you
Mhm.
might check them out. PARI Center. So it's a
Okay.
whole bunch of really smart physicists and psychologists and
I know
artists
Irvin
and
was living in Italy for many years, and probably, I would guess, Irvin Laszlo was probably
uh-huh.
associated with them as
Yeah.
well. And his son, Alex, is on our board for Planetary Citizens.
Well,
So,
that's it's this thinking has always been around, and I mean, in one way or
you know what?
another.
Here's
Look at
something.
Rumi.
After my experience in college, I went into the white light, right? So at that point in time, Midwest, mid 70s, beware, Satan appears as the angel of light, right? So I got this thing going on in my head, and I'm like, well, where the hell did that name come from anyway?
Uh-huh.
So I went to the Ball State University library, and they had the two dictionaries, A through M or A through L and M through Z, 4 inches thick, thereabout. And so I look up the word Satan, and
Uh-huh.
the very first reference was Greek, thetan,
Uh-huh.
Thetan, meaning thinker,
Uh-huh. Interesting. Uh-huh.
isn't it? And
Yeah.
because there's no external energy. That's a false belief system. There's nothing outside of us. It's all inside of us, according to what we know now, right?
Uh-huh.
And both science and spirituality are saying the same thing. Now,
Uh-huh.
with that, we're our own adversary. How we think and behave and move to where we focus our attention is what we're going to bring into reality. Now,
Uh-huh.
I know you've experienced that because as long as we've known each other, that I've known that you are always looking at greater connectivity and how you can facilitate that with others, as well as yourself. And we're on
Uh-huh.
the same page with that.
Uh,
Do you see that kind of um, deviation from the norm now, instead of being absorbed in religion, that these things are beginning to be questioned? Not that there aren't good things in religious teachings, but there's a certain element that takes us out of being connected. Intercessors, right? Tithes, offerings, all those kinds of things that separate us from what we're already connected to.
well, it does seem that the churches and temples and all, for the most part, are having trouble getting people in seats,
Mm-hmm.
especially young people, except for the big ecumenical, I mean, evangelical,
Right.
you know,
Like Joel Osteen and
churches
those
that
kind of
are
folks.
another thing, where then there's a strong sense of being part of a community, but it's
Right.
being sort of identified and shaped also around politics and stuff. So I think my sense is these dynamics have always gone on, and they have their ebbs and flows. Some of which within the Hindu traditions go back, way back past like 2,000 years ago, or
Sure.
uh,
Well, and the
or
Kali Yuga,
certainly,
right?
yes, yeah. So, but in the sort of influenced by the Abrahamic traditions and all of that, that sort of
Mhm.
history of arrow of history and the dynamics and the sense of prophecy and where we
Right.
all of those things our different, you know, kind of
Well, they all seem to
realms
be
of
pointing to the
vibration.
period, don't they? Do they seem to you to be kind of focused or pointed toward what we're experiencing as a world now? That all of these things, like the Mayan calendar, the Sumerian calendar, the Aztec calendar, the Egyptian calendars, as well as all the prophecies throughout the different spiritual sectors, I'll just call them that, whether it's Hindu or
Hmm.
Buddhist or whatever, they all seem to be pointing to this great upheaval or apocalypse, which
Uh-huh.
most people, you say, what does apocalypse mean? Oh, it's the end of the catastrophic end of the world. Well, that's not what
Yeah.
it means at all. It means
Uh-huh.
unveiling knowledge.
Yeah. Well, there's this whole thing around the rapture and started in the 1840s, I think, with a certain guy who was, you know, his interpretation
Right.
of you know, so, but it's very compelling to a lot of people because as humans, we like to feel like we're in the know. We like, we want to feel like we're
Oh, and we're
connected
scared to death of the unknown.
to.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, I think because I can't monopolize the kitchen anymore. We've got this has been wonderful, man. It seemed like a
Oh,
few minutes.
yeah, it has.
I would I'd love to finish my part of it anyway with one more of my
Please do.
rhymes
Please do.
because
I would love
it
that.
touches on some of the things you just sort of brought up in this end and maybe even what we're just talking about. But this this actually came to me more than half a lifetime ago in my very brief hang gliding career
Ooh.
when I'd been down to the dunes down below the border in Mexico to learn
Hmm.
to take off and stuff, and then had a one really great flight up near Palmdale, and then another one that was near disaster, and I I got kind of scratched up, and when Danny Arnold, who created the show, he said, "What happened to you?" I said, "Oh, a little hang gliding mishap. You know, hang gliding. You can't go hang gliding. I got too much invested. You promise me right now you won't, at least until the end of the season, you know." But I kept running into people who had hang glided off a half dome or were trying to or something. That was out
Right.
there, you know, until I met Floyd actually. And we went the same night I met Dennis and all, but Floyd and I went out and had a couple of beers. And at one point I was talking to him about that. And he said, "Boy, that seems like a kind of a unnecessary risk of life, you know." And those of us who
Oh,
knew
but it's
Floyd,
so much fun.
when we quote Floyd, we always talk in a lower voice. Well, that seemed like kind of like because he had that.
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
anyway, I said, "Well, you know, you got to be ready to die to really live." He says, "Yeah, but you can think about what you're ready to die for."
Right.
You know, it
Yeah.
kind of
You can
shifted
be
me in a way.
fearless, but don't step out in front of a bus.
But anyway, it's still with me, and it still kind of has taken on a little richer meaning for me. And it goes like this.
Okay.
It goes, "I'm not so much afraid to die or crying out for reasons why, as loath to let my death go by without I give it every try at having it on certain terms before deferring to the worms. Those terms of my death that I'll live for, that my lifetime has been fulfilled, that the harvest of hindsight is gathered, and the fields of the future are tilled, that the moment is one of reflection. My heart is at peace and is full, that bitter and sweet make connection, and I'm moving from love's gentle pull. It's life I want dying to stand for. If not, I intend to refuse. If it takes me the rest of my lifetime, I'm seeking this death that I choose. Of course, I'm not in a hurry. I get less hurried every day, but I try to stay ready as I can be. Life tastes so much sweeter that way. I find when I live my life as if each passing day were the last, I can live it that much more fully before I let it go past. The things that I value, I seize on. The things that I don't, I let go. I have nothing to lose by telling the truth, which maybe I don't effing know. As living life ready for dying is more than a way to survive. It's a way of not letting the moments go by, a way to be truly alive. Because being alive is not clinging and hoping that life will go slow. It's knowing the time will come when it does, the time when it's my time to go, when Creator says it's time to go.
And
Very good.
namaste and in
Namaste.
catch. And thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. And
Uh-huh.
don't forget, like, share, subscribe, make a comment. It's worth the effort. Your life will be better because of it. For Max and I, thanks for being with us, and I will see you next time.
Excellent. Love and peace.